Welcome to Sleepy Stories with Sam. Today, we're going to read All Quiet on the Western Front. Before we begin, take a deep breath in and slowly exhale. Let go of the day's worries, soften your thoughts, and allow yourself to drift into a place of rest and relaxation. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. We are at rest 5 miles behind the front. Yesterday we were relieved, and now our bellies are full of beef and haricot beans. We are satisfied and at peace. Each man has another mess tin full for the evening. And what is more, there is a double ration of sausage and bread. That puts a man in fine trim. We have not had such luck as this for a long time. The cook with his carroty head is begging us to eat. He beckons with his ladle to everyone that passes and spoons him out a great dollop. He does not see how he can empty his stew pot in time for coffee. Tjaden and Müller have produced 2 wash basins and had them filled up to the brim as a reserve. In Tjaden, this is voracity. In Müller, it is foresight. Where Tjaden puts it all is a mystery, for he is, and always will be, as thin as a rake. What's more important still is the issue of a double ration of smokes. 10 cigars, 20 cigarettes, and 2 quids of chew per man. Now that is decent. I have exchanged my chewing tobacco with Kaczynski for his cigarettes, which means I have 40 altogether. That's enough for a day. It is true we have no right to this windfall. The Prussian is not so generous. We have only a miscalculation to thank for it. 14 days ago, we had to go up and relieve the front line. It was fairly quiet on our sector, so the quartermaster, who remained in the rear, had requisitioned the usual quantity of rations and provided for the full company of 150 men. But on the last day, an astonishing number of English field guns opened up on us with high explosive, drumming ceaselessly on our position, so that we suffered heavily and came back only 80 strong. Last night we moved back and settled down to get a good sleep for once. Kaczynski is right when he says it would not be such a bad war if only one could get a little more sleep. In the line we have had next to none. And 14 days is a long time at one stretch. It was noon before the first of us crawled out of our quarters. Half an hour later, every man had his mess tin, and we gathered at the cookhouse, which smelled greasy and nourishing. At the head of the queue, of course, were the hungriest. Little Albert Kropp, the clearest thinker among us, and therefore the first to be Lance Corporal. Müller, who still carries his school textbooks with him, dreams of examinations, and during a bombardment, mutters propositions in physics. Lear, who wears a full beard and has a preference for the girls from officers' brothels. He swears that they are obliged by an army order to wear silk chemises and to bathe before entertaining guests of the rank of major and upwards. And as the 4th, myself, Paul Bäumer. All 4 are 19 years of age, and all 4 joined up from the same class as volunteers for the war. Close behind us were our friends. Tjaden, a skinny locksmith of our own age, the biggest eater of the company. He sits down to eat as thin as a grasshopper, and gets up as big as a bug in the family way. High Westus, of the same age, a peat digger, who can easily hold a ration loaf in his hand and say, "Guess what I've got in my fist." Then Dietering, a peasant, who thinks of nothing but his farmyard and his wife. And finally, Stanislaus Kaczynski, the leader of our group, shrewd, cunning, and hard-bitten, 40 years of age, with a face of the soil, blue eyes, bent shoulders, and a remarkable nose for dirty weather, good food, and soft jobs. Our gang formed the head of the queue before the cookhouse. We were growing impatient, for the cook paid no attention to us. Finally, Kaczynski called out to him, "Say, Heinrich, open up the soup kitchen. Anyone can see the beans are done." He shook his head sleepily. "You must all be there first." Jaden grinned. "We are all here." The sergeant cook still took no notice. "That may do for you," he said. "But where are the others?" "They won't be fed by you today. They're either in the dressing station or pushing up daisies." The cook was quite disconcerted as the facts dawned on him. He was staggered. "And I have cooked for 150 men. Kropp poked him in the ribs. "Then for once we'll have enough. Come on, begin." Suddenly a vision came over Jaden. His sharp, mousy features began to shine. His eyes grew small with cunning. His jaws twitched, and he whispered hoarsely, "Man, then you've got bread for 150 men too, eh?" The sergeant cook nodded, absent-minded and bewildered. Jaden seized him by the tunic. "And sausage?" Ginger nodded again. Tjaden's chaps quivered. "Tobacco too?" "Yes, everything." Jaden beamed. "What a bean feast. That's all for us. Each man gets, wait a bit. Yes, practically 2 issues." Then Ginger stirred himself and said, "That won't do." Then we got excited and began to crowd around. "Why won't that do, you old carrot?" demanded Kaczynski. 80 men can't have what is meant for 150. "We'll soon show you," growled Müller. "I don't care about the stew, but I can only issue rations for 80 men, persisted Ginger. Kaczynski got angry. "You might be generous for once. You haven't drawn food for 80 men. You've drawn it for the second company." "Good. Let's have it then. We are the second company." We began to jostle the fellow. No one felt kindly toward him, for it was his fault that the food twice came up to us in the line too late and cold. Under shell fire he wouldn't bring his kitchen up near enough, so that our soup carriers had to go much farther than those of the other companies. Now, Bulke of the first company is a much better fellow. He is as fat as a hamster in winter, but he trundles his pots when it comes to that right up to the very front line. We were in just the right mood, and there would certainly have been a dust-up if our company commander had not appeared. He informed himself of the dispute, and only remarked, "Yes, we did have heavy losses yesterday." He looked in the Dixie. "The beans look good." Ginger nodded. "Cooked with meat and fat." The lieutenant looked at us. He knew what we were thinking, and he knew many other things too, because he came to the company as a non-com and was promoted from the ranks. He lifted the lid from the Dixie again and sniffed. Then passing on, he said, "Serve out the whole issue. We can do with it. And bring me a plateful too." Ginger looked sheepish as Tjaden danced around him. "It doesn't cost you anything. One would think the quartermaster's store belonged to him. And now get on with it, you old blubber sticker. And don't you miscount either." "You be hanged," spat out Ginger. When things get beyond him, he throws up the sponge altogether. He just goes to pieces. And as if to show that all things were now the same to him, of his own free will he shared out 1/2 pound of synthetic honey, equally among us. Today is wonderfully good. The mail has come, and almost every man has a couple of letters and papers. We stroll over to the meadow behind the billets. Krop has the round lid of a margarine tub under his arm. On the right side of the meadow, a large common latrine has been built, a well-planned and durable construction. But that is for recruits who as yet have not learned how to make the most of whatever comes their way. We look for something better. Scattered about everywhere, there are separate individual boxes for the same purpose. They are square, neat boxes with wooden sides all round, and have unimpeachably satisfactory seats. On the sides are hand grips enabling one to shift them about. We move 3 together in a ring and sit down comfortably. For 2 hours we have been here without getting up. I well remember how embarrassed we were as recruits in barracks when we had to use the general latrine. There were no doors, and 20 men sat side by side, as in a railway carriage, so that they could be reviewed all at one glance, for soldiers must always be under supervision. Since then we have learned better than to be shy about such trifling immodesties. In time, things far worse than that came easy to us. Here in the open air, though, the business is entirely a pleasure. I no longer understand why we should always have shied at it before. It is, in fact, just as natural as eating and drinking. We did not properly appreciate these boxes when we first enlisted. They were new to us and did not fill such an important role. But now they have long been a matter of course. The soldier is on friendlier terms than other men with his stomach and intestines. 3/4 of his vocabulary is derived from these regions, and they give an intimate flavor to expressions of his greatest joy as well as of his deepest indignation. It is impossible to express oneself in any other way so clearly and pithily. Our families and our teachers will be shocked when we go home. But here it is, the universal language. Enforced publicity has in our eyes restored the character of complete innocence to all these things. More than that, they are so much a matter of course that their comfortable performance is fully as much enjoyed as the playing of a safe top running flush. Not for nothing was the word latrine rumor invented. These places are the regimental gossip shops and common rooms. We feel ourselves for the time being better off than in any palatial white-tiled convenience. There it can only be hygienic. Here it is beautiful. These are wonderfully carefree hours. Over us is the blue sky. On the horizon float the bright yellow, sunlit observation balloons and the many little white clouds of the anti-aircraft shells. Often they rise in a sheaf as they follow after an airman. We hear the muffled rumble of the front only as very distant thunder. Bumblebees droning by quite drown it. Around us stretches the flowery meadow. The grasses sway their tall spears. The white butterflies flutter around and float on the soft warm wind of the late summer. We read letters and newspapers and smoke. We take off our caps and lay them down beside us. The wind plays with our hair. It plays with our words and thoughts. The 3 boxes stand in the midst of the glowing red field poppies. We set the lid of the margarine tub on our knees and so have a good table for a game of skat. Krop has the cards with him. After every throw-in, the loser pays into the pool. One could sit like this forever. The notes of an accordion float across from the billets. Often we lay aside the cards and look about us. One of us will say, "Well, boys," or "It was a near thing that time." And for a moment we fall silent. There is in each of us a feeling of constraint. We are all sensible of it. It needs no words to communicate it. It might easily have happened that we should not be sitting here on our boxes today. It came damn near to that. And so, everything is new and brave. Red poppies and good food, cigarettes and summer breeze. Krop asks, anyone seen Kemmerich lately? He's up at St. Joseph's, I tell him. Müller explains that he has a flesh wound in his thigh, a good blighty. We decide to go and see him this afternoon. Krop pulls out a letter. Kantorek sends you all his best wishes. We laugh. Müller throws his cigarette away and says, I wish he was here. Kantorek had been our schoolmaster, an active little man in a grey tailcoat, with a face like a shrew mouse. He was about the same size as Corporal Himmelstoss, the terror of Klosterberg. It is very queer that the unhappiness of the world is so often brought on by small men. They are so much more energetic and uncompromising than the big fellows. I have always taken good care to keep out of sections with small company commanders. They are mostly confounded little martinets. During drill time, Kantorek gave us long lectures until the whole of our class went under his shepherding to the district commandant and volunteered. I can see him now, as he used to glare at us through his spectacles and say in a moving voice, "Won't you join up, comrades?" These teachers always carry their feelings ready in their waistcoat pockets and fetch them out at any hour of the day. But we didn't think of that then. There was indeed one of us who hesitated and did not want to fall into line. That was Josef Behm, a plump, homely fellow. But he did allow himself to be persuaded. Otherwise he would have been ostracized. And perhaps more of us thought as he did. But no one could very well stand out, because at that time even one's parents were ready with the word coward. No one had the vaguest idea what we were in for. The wisest were just the poor and simple people. They knew the war to be a misfortune, whereas people who were better off were beside themselves with joy, though they should have been much better able to judge what the consequences would be. Kaczynski said that was a result of their upbringing. It made them stupid. And what Katz said, he had thought about. Strange to say, Behm was one of the first to fall. He got hit in the eye during an attack, and we left him lying for dead. We couldn't bring him with us, because we had to come back helter-skelter. In the afternoon suddenly we heard him call, and saw him outside creeping towards us. He had only been knocked unconscious. Because he could not see, and was mad with pain, he failed to keep under cover, and so was shot down before anyone could go and fetch him in. Naturally, we couldn't blame Kantorek for this. Where would the world be if one brought every man to book? There were thousands of Kantoreks, all of whom were convinced that there was only one way of doing well, and that way, theirs. And that is just why they let us down so badly. For us lads of 18, they ought to have been mediators and guides to the world of maturity, the world of work, of duty, of culture, of progress, to the future. We often made fun of them and played jokes on them, but in our hearts we trusted them. The idea of authority, which they represented, was associated in our minds with a greater insight and a manlier wisdom. But the first death we saw shattered this belief. We had to recognize that our generation was more to be trusted than theirs. They surpassed us only in phrases and in cleverness. The first bombardment showed us our mistake and under it the world as they had taught it to us broke in pieces. While they continued to write and talk, we saw the wounded and dying. While they taught that duty to one's country is the greatest thing, we already knew that death throws us stronger. But for all that we were no mutineers, no deserters, no cowards, they were very free with all these expressions. We loved our country as much as they. We went courageously into every action. But also, we distinguished the false from the true. We had suddenly learned to see, and we saw that there was nothing of their world left. We were all at once terribly alone, and alone we must see it through. Before going over to see Emmerich, we pack up his things. He will need them on the way back. In the dressing station there is great activity. It reeks as ever of carbolic, ether and sweat. Most of us are accustomed to this in the billets, but here it makes one feel faint. We ask for Emmerich. He lies in a large room and receives us with feeble expressions of joy and helpless agitation. While he was unconscious, someone had stolen his watch. Müller shakes his head. I always told you that nobody should carry as good a watch as that. Müller is rather crude and tactless. Otherwise he would hold his tongue. For anybody can see that Emmerich will never come out of this place again. Whether he finds his watch or not will make no difference. At the most, one will only be able to send it to his people. How goes it, Franz? Asks Kropp. Emmerich's head sinks. Not so bad, but I have such a damned pain in my foot. We look at his bed covering. His leg lies under a wire basket. The bed covering arches over it. I kick Müller on the shin, for he is just about to tell Emmerich what the orderlies told us outside. That Emmerich has lost his foot. The leg is amputated. He looks ghastly, yellow, and wan. In his face there are already the strained lines that we know so well. We have seen them now hundreds of times. They are not so much lines as marks. Under the skin, the life no longer pulses. It has already pressed out to the boundaries of the body. Death is working through from within. It already has command in the eyes. Here lies our comrade, Emmerich, who a little while ago was roasting horse flesh with us and squatting in the shell holes. He it is still, and yet it is not he any longer. His features have become uncertain and faint, like a photographic plate on which two pictures have been taken. Even his voice sounds like ashes. I think of the time when we went away. His mother, a good plump matron, brought him to the station. She wept continually. Her face was bloated and swollen. Emmerich felt embarrassed, for she was the least composed of all. She simply dissolved into fat and water. Then she caught sight of me and took hold of my arm again and again, and implored me to look after Franz out there. Indeed, he did have a face like a child, and such frail bones that after 4 weeks pack-carrying, he already had flat feet. But how can a man look after anyone in the field? Now you will soon be going home, says Kropp. You would have had to wait at least 3 or 4 months for your leave. Emmerich nods. I cannot bear to look at his hands. They are like wax. Under the nails is the dirt of the trenches. It shows through blue-black like poison. It strikes me that these nails will continue to grow like long, fantastic cellar plants long after Emmerich breathes no more. I see the picture before me. They twist themselves into corkscrews and grow, and with them the hair on the decayed skull, just like grass in a good soil, just like grass. How can it be possible? Müller leans over. We have brought your things, Franz. Kemmerich signs with his hand. Put them under the bed. Müller does so. Kemmerich starts on again about the watch. How can one calm him without making him suspicious? Müller reappears with a pair of airman's boots. They are fine English boots of soft yellow leather, which reach to the knee and lace all the way. They are things to be coveted. Müller is delighted at the sight of them. He matches their soles against his own clumsy boots and says, "Will you be taking them with you then, Franz?" We all three have the same thought. Even if he should get better, he would be able to use only one. They are no use to him. But as things are now, it is a pity that they should stay here. The orderlies will, of course, grab them as soon as he is dead. Won't you leave them with us? Müller repeats. Kemmerich doesn't want to. They are his most prized possessions. Well, we could exchange, suggests Müller again. Out here one can make some use of them. Still, Kemmerich is not to be moved. I tread on Müller's foot. Reluctantly, he puts the fine boots back again under the bed. We talk a little more and then take our leave. Cheerio, Franz. I promise him to come back in the morning. Müller talks of doing so too. He is thinking of the lace-up boots and means to be on the spot. Kemmerich groans. He is feverish. We get hold of an orderly outside and ask him to give Kemmerich a dose of morphia. He refuses. If we were to give morphia to everyone, we would have to have tubs full. You only attend to officers properly, says Kropp viciously. I hastily intervene and give him a cigarette. He takes it. Are you usually allowed to give it then? I ask him. He is annoyed. If you don't think so, then why do you ask? I press a couple more cigarettes into his hand. Do us the favor. Well, all right, he says. Kropp goes in with him. He doesn't trust him and wants to see. We wait outside. Müller returns to the subject of the boots. They would fit me perfectly. In these boots I get blister after blister. Do you think he will last till tomorrow after drill? If he passes out in the night, we know where the boots... Kropp returns. Do you think... he asks. Done for, says Müller emphatically. We go back to the huts. I think of the letter that I must write tomorrow to Kemmerich's mother. I am freezing. I could do with a tot of rum. Müller pulls up some grass and chews it. Suddenly little Kropp throws his cigarette away, stamps on it savagely, and looking round him with a broken and distracted face, stammers. Damned shit. The damned shit. We walk on for a long time. Kropp has calmed himself. We understand. He sees red. Out here every man gets like that sometime. What has Kantorek written to you? Müller asks him. He laughs. We are the Iron Youth. We all three smile bitterly. Kropp rails. He is glad that he can speak. Yes, that's the way they think. These 100,000 Kantoreks. Iron Youth. Youth. We are none of us more than 20 years old. But young? Youth? That is long ago. We are old folk.